And so I opened up about this on the show, not really thinking much of it. And before I knew it, I'm starting to get these messages, and it's like really, really harsh stuff.
And now we're going to catch up with the left-wing political commentator Anna Kasparian, who is going viral for a clip where she explains the horrifying story and moment that finally woke her up to just how unhinged and bizarre the modern far left has become. Take a listen to this clip of Anna on the Jillian Michaels podcast, where she explains something horrible that happened to her while she was walking her dog in LA.
In 2022, it was around March. I was walking my dog. It was not quite dark yet, but the sun was setting. As I'm walking my dog, I see these two guys that were just kind of like moving around weirdly. You know, they seemed kind of manic, and their clothes were tattered. So I knew that they were probably homeless. And I also knew that they're probably on something just based on like the twitchy way they were acting. But living in LA, I mean, there's homeless people everywhere, right? So I've never had problems. I didn't think anything of it. But as I was bending down to pick up my dog's mess, one of the guys like grabs me by my hips, and he had an erection.
Oh God.
And just starts like humping me. And I didn't know what to do. Like I was terrified. I didn't have a weapon on me.
Yep.
Like I had no way of defending myself. I didn't know how far it was going to go because it's two guys. I'm by myself with my little dog. It was one of the most terrifying things ever, because I'm pretty good at defending myself. In that moment, I just knew there was no option.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And luckily, he stopped, and they just laughed at me and walked away as they were laughing at me. And so there was the fear, and then the humiliation, and weirdly shame. Like I felt ashamed for some reason. And it was awful. And it was really taking a toll on my mental health, because I have to walk my dog, right? So at least 2 or 3 times a day, I'm going outside kind of scared.
So we're going to get into the fallout from her progressive viewers and fans from this incident that made her wake up to the left's insanity, the far left at least. But first, I just have a couple things to say about this really horrible story. One, it is not some isolated incident. I've come to know many women over the years, especially when I lived in DC, who routinely had just some of the most horrible experiences being harassed by homeless people or by men on the street. And as a guy who honestly walked through the world not really thinking about those things, it opened my eyes to what women still go through and gave me an appreciation for many of the concerns they have. I've personally been harassed by homeless people in a homophobic manner, but I've never worried about this kind of sexual harassment or assault just walking down the street. And I acknowledge that in many ways that's a privilege. You'd think that just telling this story wouldn't really be controversial, right? It's just a horrible thing that happened to her. She was a victim of sexual assault, and everyone would sympathize with her, especially the progressive feminists in her audience, right? Right? Apparently not. Anna is a host for the progressive network, The Young Turks, and she went on to recount how many progressive members of her audience shamed her in different ways for sharing this story and stigmatizing the unhoused, some even bizarrely accusing her of racism. Take a listen.
And so I opened up about this on the show, not really thinking much of it. And before I knew it, I'm starting to get these messages, and it's like really, really harsh stuff. And it's about how you are painting a picture of the homeless community. You know, how could you be like this? You know, these are your unhoused neighbors and they need help. A few people accused me of being racist when I had never disclosed the race of the individuals who did this to me. And in fact, they were white. And so like when they started accusing me of being racist, I'm like, wait a minute. Why are you assuming that the people who did this?
Of course.
Yeah, like, I think you might have a problem here.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that woke me up. That woke me up because I'm like, oh my God.
So this was really breathtaking. Honestly, it's astounding that anybody could hear that story that Anna recounted of how she was sexually harassed and assaulted by homeless people on the street and somehow get mad at her for that situation. And look, certainly, not all Democrats or leftists or liberals are this brain broken, not at all. But the ultra woke progressive mob online absolutely is. And to me, it just shows the shortcomings of their ideology. under this woke worldview, they really can only view the world through the lens of the critical theory, right? Where there's the oppressed and the oppressors. There's the marginalized people and the privileged people. And in this case, Anna, who's an affluent, well-educated, probably upper middle class woman, is the privileged one. And these unhoused people, because saying homeless, which just means the exact same thing, is offensive now, these unhoused people must be victims. So we can't shame them, even though in this case, they were actually the oppressors. They were the bad guys. They weren't the victims. And they're human beings with agency. And whatever bad stuff has happened to them does not justify them hurting other people. That's how I view it. But that's not how they can view things in this oppression Olympics worldview. It's just the marginalized and the privileged, and this is so bad to shame them for this rather than wanting to help them. You sound delusional. If that's your perspective, you're totally out of touch with the reality, which, frankly, a lot of the woke online progressive crowd is. So I'm sad that this happened to Anna, but I'm glad she's woken up to how crazy some of those people are, honestly. In the same way, I have to just point out how hilarious it is to me how they stumbled into this racism thing that they so often do, where they, one, cry racism like the boy who cried wolf, to the point where people stop listening and taking it seriously. Even though racism exists and is evil and should be taken seriously, they just throw that term around like candy on Halloween these days, to the point where people stop taking it seriously. And it's really unfortunate and does a disservice to the actual victims of racism that are still plentiful. But two, it's hilarious how they just assume these were non-white people. It really does remind you that accusations can be confessions. And when the woke crowd is screaming racism or like all the time, sometimes it's because they've got some racism going on inside, and so they assume that everyone else must too. Now, I still disagree with Anna Kasparian on many things. She's still left of center on so many policies that I'm sure we could debate and disagree with, but I've grown to appreciate her as a voice speaking out against the fringe left and pushing back on some of their delusional ideas about crime and police and punishment and government and society, because oftentimes people aren't able to hear things from the other side. But when somebody on their side says it, they're more open to the criticism or the pushback. So I value her as a voice in that role. I do worry, though, that at this ultra progressive network, the Young Turks, she might not last too much longer. I don't know. It's clearly causing a lot of tension that she's offering different perspectives and pushing back on some stuff. And I hope that she sticks around and she's able to continue to be on that platform and speak to that audience. But if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet on it. I think the progressive woke young staffers who run that organization will at some point revolt. And there's got to be a lot of chaos behind the scenes there. If you have a moderate person speaking facts and questioning woke narratives, that's not going to go over well on an ultra progressive network. It's just not. And some people have shamed Anna for saying, oh, it took you long enough to wake up, or it had to happen to you personally. And I understand that sentiment a little bit, but at the same time, I think it's unproductive. You don't convert people by shaming them for coming to your side, right? You have to reach out with an open hand, not a closed fist. And while I think, obviously, we should think beyond ourselves when it comes to politics, it's normal that a lot of people don't consider a different perspective until something directly affects them. That's just the way that humans work sometimes. We can be myopic, we can have tunnel vision, and I don't think shaming Anna or hating on her over that is productive or useful. But what do you guys think? Are you interested in Anna Kasparian's recent political evolution? Have you followed her career over the years? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and do hit that like button while you're at it.